Hello, BookTube. I've got a longer poem to read to you today on Poetry Wednesday. I've gone back to the Norton Anthology of Poetry that I got for $1 at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston. Great, fantastic thing. I want to stress here what I and also Mark Richardson often say when these things come up. Don't write these things off. If you're at a yard sale or a thrift shop of some kind and you see one of these things, don't write them off as just a school textbook. These old Norton anthologies of American literature, English literature, world literature, poetry, are often monuments of scholarship, just amazingly good. The only caveats is the one that Mark and I would share is be very careful to look at them, right? These are marketed to schools. So be careful that you don't buy a copy that's obnoxiously highlighted all over. A lot of them aren't. A lot of students get them and never use them. Maybe you were one of those students. And then the caution that I would issue on my own would be make sure that you're getting one that's old enough. The closer you get to the 21st century, the more non-literary and non-historical concerns start to weave their way into what determined what would be in the book and what wouldn't be. So that if there is a Norton Anthology of Poetry in 2022, then you looking for a survey of poetry will find no Meredith, no Marvell, no Dryden. And it's not that those time periods will be skipped. Those time periods will be represented by fifth-rate poetasters no one's ever heard of who happen to be women, or Antiguan slaves or whatever. They aren't in there for, and they're not in there for any kind of representation of the greatest literary achievements of the era as the book moves forward chronologically. Instead, they're there, I don't know, to virtue signal on the part of the editors, for the editors to make sure you remember at all times what a horrible person you are. I have no idea. To redress social injustices like a poetry anthology in Grinnell College is going to do that. If you don't want to run afoul of that kind of politicking, then you should find an older Norton anthology. This thing is older. This is, a lot of times I don't even tell you what edition. I don't know exactly what edition this is, but the hardcover was $7.50. So that gives you an idea of how long ago this was. And I want to read you a longer poem, a bit of a longer poem today, by a poet that we haven't touched yet. You can tell another way that you can tell that this anthology is old. The poet is Archibald MacLeish. And another way that you can tell that this anthology is old is that it has his birth date, 1892, and then an open bracket. He hadn't died yet when this thing came out. And this is called American Letter. And I think this came out in, I wonder if this will tell me. I think this came out in 1930, this poem. Yeah, it did. This came out in 1930. It'll be the longest poem that I've read so far for our daily poetry, but I'll try to do it justice. And it goes like this. The wind is east, but the hot weather continues, blue and no clouds, the sound of the leaves thin, dry like the rustling of paper, scored across with the slate-shrill screech of the locust. The tossing of pines is the low sound. In the wind's running, the wild carrots smell of the burning sun. Why should I think of the dolphins of Capo de Mele? Why should I see my mind the taut sail of the hill over Saint-Tropez and your hand on the tiller? Why should my heart be troubled with palms still? I am neither a sold boy nor a Chinese official sent to sicken in PA for some low-yang dish. This is my own land, my sky, my mountain. This, not the humming pines and the surf and the sound, nor in the dusk and the harbor, floating the motionless ship and the sea-drowned star. I am neither Po Chui nor another after from far from home, in a strange land, daft for the talk of his own sort and the taste of his lettuces. This land is my native land. And yet I am sick for home, for the red roofs and the olives and the foreign words and the smell of the sea-fall. How can a wise man have two countries? How can a man have the earth and the wind and want a land far off, alien, smelling of palm trees and the yellow gorse at noon in the long calms? It is a strange thing to be an American. Neither an old house it is, with the air tasting of hung herbs and the sun returning year after year to the same door and the churn making the same sound in the cool of the kitchen, mother to son's wife, and the place to sit marked in the dusk by the worn stone at the wellhead. That, nor the eyes like each other's eyes, and the skull shaped to the same fault, and the hands sameness. Neither a place it is nor a blood name. America is west, and the wind blowing. America is a great word, and the snow, a way, a white bird, the rain falling, a shining thing in the mind, and the gulls call. America is neither a land nor a people. A word's shape it is, a wind's sweep. America is alone, many together, many of one mouth, of one breath, dressed as one, and none brothers among them. Only the taught speech and the aped tongue. America is alone, and the gulls are calling. It is a strange thing to be an American. It is strange to live on the high world in the stare of the naked sun and the stars as our bones live. Men in the old lands housed by their rivers. They built their towns in the vales of the earth's shelter. We first inhabit the world. We dwell on the half-earth, on the open curve of a continent. Sea is divided from sea by the dayfall. The dawn rides the low east with us many hours. First are the capes, then are the shorelands, now the blue Appalachians faint at the day rise. The willows shudder in the light on the long Ohio. The lakes scatter the low sun. The prairies slide out of the dark. In the eddy of clean air, the smoke goes up from the high plains of Wyoming. The steep Sierras rise. The struck foam flames at the wind's heel on the far Pacific. Already the noon leans to the eastern cliff. The elms darken the door and the dust-heavy lilacs. It is strange to sleep in the bare stars and to die on an open land where few bury before us. From the new earth the dead return no more. It is strange to be born of no race and no people. In the old lands there are many together. They keep the wise past and the words spoken in common. They remember the dead with their hands, their mouths dumb. They answer each other with 2 words in their meeting. They live together in small things. They eat the same dish. Their drink is the same, and their proverbs. Their youth is like. They are like in the ways of love. They are many men. They are always others besides them. Here it is one man and another, and wide on the darkening hills the faint smoke of the houses. Here it is one man and the wind in the boughs. Therefore our hearts are sick for the south water. The smell of the gorse comes back to our night thought. We are sick at heart for the red roofs and the olives. We are sick at heart for the voice and the footfall. Therefore we will not go though the sea calls us. This is our land. This is our people. This that is neither a land nor a race. We must reap the wind here in the grass for our soul's harvest. Here we must eat our salt or our bones starve. Here we must live, or live only as shadows. This is our race, we that have none, and have had neither the old walls nor the voices around us. This is our land, this is our ancient ground, the raw earth, the mixed blood, and the strangers, the different eyes, the wind, and the heart's change. These we will not leave, though the old call us. This is our country, earth, our blood, our kind. Here we will live our years till the earth blind us. The wind blows from the east. The leaves fall. Far off in the pines a jay rises. The wind smells of haze and the wild, ripe apples. I think of the massive set and the sweet rain. And what's going on at there, there's a lot to talk about here, more than we can do in a video, but what's going on at the end there of this struggle, this poem is a struggle, and set is a foreign port. It is not American. And the narrator of the poem is remembering the mass and the smells and the tastes and the people that live there in the Venice of the Languedoc. The narrator of the poem is remembering something that is very much not American. But right before that final line, I think of the massive set in the sweet rain. That is a separate final line. The separate 3-line stanza right before that is the wind blows from the east, the leaves fall, far off in the pines a jay rises, the wind smells of haze and the wild ripe apples. So there's no, in that final bit, before we get to that twist that takes us outside of the country that this whole thing is about, before we get to that, we get something that is purely evocative. It has not even a place name. It's just eternal nature things. Very interesting way, a very interesting 1-2 step to unsettle the reader on their way out the door. But the main bulk of the poem is that thing that keeps being repeated, is a strange thing to be an American. And this is partially connected to, I didn't pick the poem for this, but this is partially connected to what I was talking about, because a modern anthology would never reprint a poem like this. Even when I was reading it to you, you could probably see why, right? Even if you're not partaking of stupid, partisan, foam-flecked Twitter politics, reading this poem, you're immediately going to be thinking of something that, when this was written in 1930, I trust me, Archibald MacLeish was not thinking about it. And that is the fact that this country was inhabited when white people came here. So when the narrator of the poem keeps saying it's a strange thing to be an American, this is our land, this is our ancient place, our fires, our trees, our horizons. There's that wonderful stanza about how big the country is, about how the roaming light of sunrise will find the coasts and the wetlands and the high prairies and the forests and the mountains. That's wonderful. Uh, but the parts of the poem in which the narrator of the poem is saying over and over again that we keep hearing the call to our ancestral lands. What is it about palm trees and olives and red roofs? He's thinking about provincial places, that very condescending stanza about what those places are like, how they're small, and they have small proverbs and small folklore. He's thinking about the old world, whatever your immigrant strain claims as the old world, whether it's the red roofs are in Sicily or in the rest of Italy, or whether they're in Ireland, or whether they're in Eastern Europe. The poem is looking at the fact that most Americans that Archibald MacLeish is thinking about have that call somewhere in their family tree. They have those little proverbs, those little folklores, those red tile roofs that do present a call, but they don't go. We don't answer. Americans don't answer that call. Instead, they stay here, rootless and yet rooted. What was that great line? Here we must eat our salt or our bones starve. Uh, and that is all. I think this is beautifully done. I myself don't think that Archibald MacLeish was by nature a poet. I know that's a weird thing to say for somebody that won a slew of Pulitzers, but I think his I think he was more of what was once upon a time called a bookman. I think he was much more that than he was a poet. And I think that if I had 100 pages and a degree was writing on it, I could prove that in this poem alone. But it's a lovely thing. This has a lovely incantatory power to it. The one drawback, the one caveat that you'll be reading with 2022 eyes, a century later, is this business of the beautiful sprawling continent of America being a blank slate that is only filled with immigrants from other countries, specifically in Europe. The call out in the last line, specifically in Europe, isn't true, and thankfully we're a little bit more aware of that in 2022 than Archibald MacLeish was 100 years ago. This wasn't a blank slate of a continent. It wasn't full of pristine wilderness and all the beaver you can eat and no one using it. It was full. It was completely populated with tribes and confederacies and whole civilizations, long histories, long literatures, and they were exterminated or moved from that land, or they'd be writing poems like this themselves. That complicates the enjoyment of this poem, but unlike the sentiment in later versions of the Norton Anthology of Poetry, I don't say that it eliminates the enjoyment of the poem. It complicates it, but it doesn't eliminate it. It's a very good thing that we're more conscious of those things now than people were in Archibald MacLeish's day. That is just a very good thing. There's nothing woke or Twitter about that. That part is very good. We should be much more conscious of that. Nevertheless, I don't think that it invalidates the beauty of this poem at all. And I wanted to try my hand at reading you something a little longer. This is not rah-rah patriotism, but this is, in its own way, a kind of tribute to America. It's in a complicated kind of haunted and not quite voluntary way. I like that very much about it. I like Archibald MacLeish's poems more the more I go back to them, even though, once again, a familiar refrain here, where is the 21st century biography of this incredibly remarkable figure? Where is that biography? I don't know how much you know about Archibald MacLeish, but he was a fascinating figure, and one of the great patron saints of libraries in America. Which is why I say I don't think he was naturally cut out as a poet. He could do it, but I think he was much more a bookman than he was a poet. And as he used to quip, he was the Librarian of Congress. He was in charge of the Library of Congress for quite some time, and was revolutionary in his approach to that. He found a largely sleepy institution that it was doing lots of things wrong, and he fixed a lot of those things. Every once in a while, whether it's in a small town in Vermont or in a huge Library of Congress, every once in a while you'll get just the right person to come along, and they're perfectly happy to get along with everybody, but they've got a vision. They know what they want. They know how to improve what's around them. And Archibald MacLeish was one of those people, far more a memorial to him in terms of what he did for libraries than his body of poetry. But he used to quip to people that he didn't want to be the Librarian of Congress. The quip it went something like, he was put in that position by President Roosevelt. And he used to quip to people that President Roosevelt decided that I wanted to be the Librarian of Congress. Or something close to that. He was went to World War One, fought on the front lines in World War One, managed to come back alive, which is more than you could say for instance, his own brother, who didn't make it back alive from the battles of World War One. And he was right there in the so-called lost generation, the 1920s Paris that we've been talking about because of Hemingway, because The Sun Also Rises is now in the public domain. That has been on everybody's mind. People have been writing about that. I've been talking about it a little bit more. And when we think about the people that came and went from, all of those famous bars and restaurants in the Paris of the lost generation, well, Archibald MacLeish was right there, right? He was right there the whole time. And we don't remember him in that context. And maybe we would if somebody would write a great 800-page biography of him. So there's a ton of material, and as I always say, there's probably a huge amount of unconsulted material. The only reason I mention that is in case some enterprising biographer is out there. I know there are quite a few academicians who watch my channel, even though I do nothing but bash their own little world. A lot of them tell me that my bashing is completely right, that a lot of their world has turned toxic and ideological. But the reason that I always mention unplumbed tranches of original documents is because that's how you sell a biography. In the modern American publishing world, that's how you sell a biography, you have to be able to say, I have consulted this whole batch of stuff that no one has ever consulted before. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't. But nevertheless, you do. And I am sure that such things exist with Archibald MacLeish. Maybe there's a book that's out there that I don't know about, or maybe there's a big book that's coming out that I don't know about. I have my ear pressed to the door for a lot of those plans, but I miss as many as I get. But lacking that, a big mentor or picador or basic books or Penguin Classic collection of his poetry, maybe some essays thrown in there. Where is that volume? I have no idea where that volume is. Maybe it's nobody's fault. Maybe it's a nightmare of copyright holders. That could very well be, but it bugs me. so I thought that I would share my bugging with you. So that's our poem for today. We went back to the Norton Anthology of Poetry for a nice long work about what it is to be an American. What it is to be American. How strange a thing it is to be American. And who knows what we'll do next time. I mean, today is Wednesday. Tomorrow is Poetry Thursday, which started this whole thing. But I am now so thoroughly having fun reading you a poem a day that I don't foresee stopping. I've got plenty of anthologies. It's boring the bean, but it's not boring me. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.